Welcome to Truth Reveal, episode 3, covering the unleavened Bible and discussing the meaning of life. This show is brought to you by Aloha in the Lion. I am the Lion. I will be hosting the show this evening. Aloha is still out in the trenches, and he will join when he can. And we will be having another podcast that has to do with that, with his life in the trenches. Yesterday, when I left off, I guess I went over or something and couldn't finish what I was doing. Of course, nothing goes to plan. I thought I scheduled this episode yesterday, set up a time, but I don't know where it went. And when I came in, everything was different. So kind of funny, you can know the meaning of life, but not be able to do a simple little podcast. Anyway, I am starting to get more comfortable and I'm having fun now. Actually been having fun anyway, but it's been a little bit challenging getting used to this. So anyway, I left off yesterday. I was revealing symbol words in the Bible in helping to interpret. And I left off trying to describe tongues, but that was breaking up. So tongues, that basically too, when I'm reading the Bible and I'm doing it for my eternal soul, what does it mean to me personally? Well, when it speaks of tongues, it's just saying that God speaks to us in tones. People may already know this. A lot of people do, I'm sure. But with me, I would be pondering something and then I'd get a feeling and I would know something. I would know it and I'd know the whole thing unwrapped. But it was just in a feeling. So basically, then I had to go into my heart and I had to translate it into words. Otherwise, it's like a dream. It'll go away. So sometimes I'll get a picture. My very first real experience of God connecting with me and speaking to me was in words in real time. It sounds like your own voice, but it isn't because of the content, because of the feeling of it. It just feels higher. It feels different. So anyway, tongues is actually, in a personal sense, is God speaking in tones, which God is vibration. So God does not talk in words except in these bodies because these bodies belong to God. And it's feelings, intuition. And then judgment is consequence. Very simple. That's the thing about God is going to judge you and God judges. No, God does not judge you. God says, do not judge or you'll be judged. But basically in universal law, God's law, when creating this physical experience, which by the way, I've heard it said, we aren't physical beings trying to have a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. That's the way it starts. In the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So anyway, judgment is consequence. It's because God is love. And so in these bodies, we get to go into a dense energy and we get to hate and we get to have fear, basically anything of fear. And so the consequence of fear or hate, or if we do something and we feel guilty, it's the guilt that causes the separation. And that's what the word sin means, as I said before. Separation. So it's our own judgment and our own guilt, or like when Adam and Eve ate the apple, they felt guilty and they were hiding from God, so to speak, but it was their guilt. And so they separated themselves. But of course, God knew right where they were. And then again, the thing about that, what does a child usually do if you say, don't touch that? They're going to touch it. That was a setup. Okay, then the world in Egypt basically is just talking about the physical separation experience. So 400 years in bondage of Egypt was just saying that it's going to be quite a bit of time experiencing separation in the physical world. And we do that because it brings God pleasure. It's God's playground. And then sacrifice. Sacrifice is simply just for me, for all of us, to let go of the desires of this worldly physical life and see that it's just a temporary thing. It's the thing of give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God's what is God's. What is God's? Our life, our whole life. Man has but one life, God's life. I am that I am. So basically just let go of the desires of this world, realize that it's temporary, and turn it over to God because God's already got it. And we either go along kicking and screaming or we go along gracefully. I had a scripture just to pull up real quick for where I'd like to go, and I'm going to stop trying to plan these things. It's much better just to be spontaneous, and maybe that's why my scheduled episode went away. There's no mistake. There's a reason for everything. And when God tells you to do something, you do it. If you don't, then the consequence is that you separate. And that would be what we'd call sin. Matthew 16:26. For what is a man profited if he shall gain the world, or if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Mark 8:36. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the world, the whole world, and lose his own soul? Okay, now that is where we go reverse. Turn that around. What that's saying? Well, that's okay, God talking to this body and saying, okay, if you go out and your whole thing is about gaining the world and having success and your pride and ego and gratification and all of those things, then your body's going to die. Well, what happens when your body dies? Your soul leaves. It goes to paradise or to the other place, which I'm going to get into. We'll call it purgatory or hell. I mean, I guess we'll just call it hell, but there's different versions of the original scriptures of hell. So anyway, that's just basically just, common sense. If your body dies, it loses a soul. And it's just talking to my body. If I don't give my life to God and ascend this body, then I lose that soul. So this body then is temporary and it goes away. When Jesus was on the cross, the man told the man next to him that he would be with him this day in paradise, but yet Jesus apparently went to hell. Okay. So there's the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. Lazarus, the poor, desolate person that's on the street and he's begging, and the rich man passes him by. And then they both die and they go to, Lazarus goes to paradise. And the rich man goes to a purgatory sort of thing. It's the same place. They see each other in, it's described as Abraham's bosom, which actually doesn't really matter. That's not really a big deal what that means. It's where we go between lives. It's where our soul goes as an individual without a brain, without a heart. Now, if our body is very much into fear when the body dies, well, that's the energy of the soul. So the soul transfers that energy out of the body, and the body actually gets dense to where it can't hold the soul anymore. So the soul leaves, body dies. And then you go to paradise. You don't go to heaven. You will not go to heaven if you die and you lose your brain and your heart. Now, that's not to say that you get to a high enough level of vibration that you could drop your body off and then just create a new one, instantaneously, because like God said, he could make Hebrews out of these stones. So they didn't have to go through the birthing process. He could have just made them out of stones, but he didn't even need stones. He could have just imagined them and they'd be there. And then in the King James Version, when it's talking about not, being contrary to God and to love, being in danger of the eternal damnation. Now, if you read that's why I love the King James Version, and I just, even though it is kind of hard to muddle through with the these and thous and things, it is a very good, pure form of the Bible. And the unleavened part, the mystery, the things that are messages to our soul, they can't be touched. They nobody understood what they meant in order to even try to mess with that. And the Bible has been messed with. It's been changed. I think it's been more to make it a gender thing, but maybe not. Maybe that's just the plan of it. The experience to be female. But anyway, the hell thing, they were in the same place, and Lazarus was asking for, the rich man was asking for Lazarus to, touch some water on his tongue because he was thirsty. Well, what does thirsty mean? As I said before, water, stream, things like that means spiritual energy. And C is God's pure energy. So Lazarus, because he was not in love when he died, he goes to this same place. It's not even a place really. It's just between. It's just a place of energy. And we do have an ability to create a place that, looks familiar to us. Kind of like in the movie, What Dreams May Come. It's similar to that, I think. I have seen a place for myself where I would go between lives. As a young soul, it's probably more spent like the rich man, thirsty, looking for the spirit because it doesn't understand yet, but there's only love around it, and that love will always transcend. But the Lazarus, he's over there in paradise, he's like living it good. But then they'll have to reincarnate. They'll have to go back into a body because you have to have your brain and you have to have your heart. That's just no two ways about it. And that's what Jesus showed us. Jesus ascended into heaven. And it said the seventh heaven, which I explained before, is theta vibration, which is known in mind science, and it's measured out and it's all known. And that is the color red, which is the blood of Christ. And, it's also, Christ is also green because alpha is also Christ consciousness, but it's the first level, or as a person growing up as a child to become as one of these children, it's the last part before they go into the age of accountability into beta, which is blue. Very significant to know those colors, because cleansed in the blood of Christ, that's cleansed in theta vibration. Now, alpha vibration is, you go into alpha vibration and you can heal yourself. You can do anything you want in there. The theta is a higher consciousness. And then when we transform our bodies into that theta consciousness, then we go into forever growing down the line, or into God's consciousness. And it's basically just an expansion of God being an experiential being. So anyway, the between lives, as it says, this day you'll be with me in paradise. And it shows what that paradise is. And it also said that Jesus conquered hell that day. He went into hell and he conquered it. So it's the two places, and that's in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Now, hell, in danger of the eternal damnation, that's because God is love. So when we leave these bodies of density and we go into, then our spiritual energy goes back into God's love. If our spirit, as in the rich man, it's not in love, so it's contrary, so it's separated. But that's only temporary because every soul will grow. But I will get into that. Not every soul is meant to, or it'll just be a temporary thing at times, and it talks about that too. But hell, the word Gehenna, is a place in Israel, ancient Israel, where they had a fire burning down off a cliff, and they would go and throw their trash in, and the fire would burn always. It was always burning because it always had trash to burn. But what happens? The trash burns up, and then new trash goes in. So that's basically what hell is that the soul goes into the eternal damnation, which is love. If you're separated from love, love burns you like fire. So it's like in this lifetime, when you hate, when you're in fear, it burns. It's burning. It doesn't hurt the person that you hate or the thing that you hate. It really hurts yourself because you're contrary to the love. And so it's an eternal damnation, and it happens in the body. It happens when you leave the body, as in the example of the rich man. And then when you go back into another body, you gain more experience. You start feeling that the time-space suit lamp, as described in the parable of the virgins with the full lamps of oil. So basically, that's very simple. And I know that reincarnation, I actually put religion for the description of these podcasts. Well, the first one was different. It was public or something like that, or not public, but society. They don't give a religion spirituality choice. So I did it for religion because I come from the religion. I come from religion. I had the born again experience. I went to church. I read the Bible, and that was what I was supposed to do. I was brought through that. And then I got to get the higher learning when it was put into me to pray for understanding, wisdom, insight. And also when I read the Bible, I said Solomon was the wisest person that ever lived, or would ever live, or whatever, but it didn't say nobody else could. So I said, hey, God, I want wisdom. I want all the wisdom. And I believe I did receive. And anybody can. All you do is ask, receive. Now, if you hear this and your soul doesn't have the full lamp of oil, you can ask and it'll come. It may be later on in life. It might just get a seed. Basically everything is need to know. You will receive, but it may not come to you in this lifetime or in years or whatever. But do ask, always ask. Okay, I want to talk a little more about Christ consciousness. Christ being like the crystal in a ham radio. That's the way it came to me early on. Just explaining that we have to transform our physical thoughts, the thoughts in our brain that are in beta vibration, and God is in alpha and theta vibration. So we have to change that in order to communicate with God and to understand God, to get that tone, to be able to translate that tone and understand it. So Christ is that part between us. God says it's his son, but it's just a way to be able to have a separation, to be able to create these things. And once again, I'll say that in Revelation, and I'll say this many times, God created all things, and for God's pleasure, all things were created. Okay, now, wherever God began, I can't know that. I'm a human being still. And I hope to know that. I ask that. And I look for that understanding. Where did it come from? Because in the beginning, it was just God substance. And then somehow that substance began to, gained an imagination somehow. And that imagination then it wanted pleasure. So that imagination created this world, this physical universe for that pleasure. So then Christ was created, and Christ was created so that God could go into this physical experience and unconscious of self, but then to grow to understand self, to be an experience of self. And then where it says created in God's image and likeness, change that to in God's imagination and pleasure. It also means that we are created in God's likeness, as in we're soul, and we have, eternity. We live for eternity, and we can experience the Alpha and the Omega. So that's the truth of Christ. That's what is God's Son. And Jesus, as I've said before, okay, basically, people go to church, they give themselves to Jesus, and then they sit down in their pew and they pray and they do this, and because they think now they're going to heaven when they die, they're going to die and go to heaven. But that's not what the Bible says. It says, come with me now, let the dead bury the dead if you want eternal life. And the man that asked that question, that he told that to, walked away, with his head down, like, oh, great. Missed out, because he had to go bury his father. He had to go die again. But then when the lamp fills up with oil, then we do what Jesus showed us how to do. We have our time in the wilderness. We're baptized in spirit. The water baptism is a symbolic, which actually, when I was baptized in water, I had a very amazing experience. Felt like I had to put a seatbelt on. And there's a movie called, I can't remember it now, but there's a thing in it that says, I'm not in buildings made of wood or stone, but split a piece of wood, there I am. Lift a stone and you find me. That's true. That is the truth. Now, God, of course, is in the buildings also. But if we don't realize that our body is the temple, and that the Bible is written for us individually, for our individual soul, if we desire to know the meaning of life, which I think most everybody does. Well, meaning of life is very simple. It's God's life. It's for God to grow, to experience, to go from nothing to thing, and then return to a higher consciousness of experience of that. So basically, you can't know hot without knowing cold. You can't know up without down. You can't know healing without sickness. So it's just to go along with that. I'm going to make this short today. I just wanted to come in and finish the meanings and talk about hell and purgatory and all those things. But nobody burns in hell forever. No soul, it can't. Because that would be to be lukewarm, and because you would stop. There'd be no growth. And God says, if you're lukewarm, he spews you out of your mouth. So you're either going up or down. Oh, I did want to touch on, there are humans that God just puts the energy into, and they're born, but they're acting on their DNA. They're like an animal that works on instinct. It's a very low energy. All they have is the DNA. They don't have experience of existence. And I'll get into that too. It's kind of a difficult thing to explain, but I'll do the best I can. I think I can, but anyway, so some humans in this world are here just to be dense, just because there's balance. There's always the good and evil. It comes equal. Now, a person that is evolved, their energy is very high, very, very big. So the balance needs dense souls that are just on automatic with whatever their DNA is and their brain and their heart. But then when that body dies, that soul, it's can't exist in the love. So I think it talks about what a plume of smoke or a spiral of smoke coming out. It just fades away. It returns to God. It returns to the is of God, the substance. And also about creating God's imagination for God's pleasure. It says in the Bible, a people without vision will perish. And that's also what that is talking about. Without imagination, there is no creation and there is no experience. And then the great teacher that was called Buddha, he said that the path of enlightenment is the middle way, the middle between two extremes. One extreme is good and one extreme is evil. So we in our lifetimes come to where we get to that middle way, and that's enlightenment. And then the process is to then expand into the seventh heaven, into the blood of Christ, the theta energy. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you very much.